The Paranormal Chick here. Welcome to episode 9 of my podcast. Today we are going to talk about Native American legends, specifically Wendigos, Skinwalkers, and of course, witness accounts. I really want to talk about Wendigos and Skinwalkers and the difference of what they are because there's so much misconception about the legends and the myths regarding these two creatures, and not just that, but the confusion of werewolves, shapeshifters, and the dogmen. They're like all tied together when they're all separate entities. But today specifically, we're just going to talk Wendigo and Skinwalkers. So without further ado, what is a Wendigo? A Wendigo is a human who cannibalizes another human. He or she then is turned into a demonic humanoid creature that craves human flesh. Per folklore, even one little scratch from a Wendigo can make you one as well. The Wendigo itself originates from the Algonquin speaking tribes, and as the legend goes, the first ever Wendigo was once a lost hunter, and during a brutal, cold winter, the man's intense hunger drove him to cannibalism. After feasting on humans' flesh, he was transformed into a crazed man-beast, roaming the forest in search of more people to eat. And in another version of that story, the first Wendigo is said to have been a warrior who made a deal with the devil in order to save his tribe. He gave up his soul and was transformed into a Wendigo. So basically, it's a demonic being that eats humans, eats man. Some describe the Wendigos as skeleton-like figures with ash-toned skin, while others say they have large, sharp claws and massive eyes like an owl. Just really depends. Every tribe has a different description of a Wendigo. Roughly translated, the word Wendigo means the evil spirit that devours mankind. And believe it or not, there's an infamous case of a Wendigo. And that was based off a tribe member by the name of Swift Runner. He was a Native American man who murdered and ate his whole family during the winter of 1879. Swift Runner claimed to be possessed by a Wendigo spirit at the time of the murders. Regardless, he was still hanged for his crime. So that's basically what a Wendigo is. It's vastly different from a Skinwalker, and it's more of like the northern Canadian tribes of Native Americans is where you see the folklore and the legends and the myths of the Wendigo. Now, let's dive into Skinwalkers. So Skinwalkers, they come from more of like the Pueblo Indians. We're talking Hopi, Navajo, Apache, Ute tribes. So they're more down south. Basically, a Skinwalker starts out as a person who practices witchery ways. They're not necessarily bad at first, because you're not bad or, good, or you're not evil or good when you could be either or, basically, when you're practicing witchery. They call it witchery ways. To become a true Skinwalker, the person has to choose to murder to gain the power and the ability to shift into animals. Basically, they have to murder a loved one, is how the legend goes. They murder a loved one, they gain the ability to shift into animals as well as other supernatural powers. They are also said to wear the skins of the animals that they transform into, hence the name Skinwalker. And I want to make note that a Skinwalker is not just a wolf. It could be a coyote, it could be a bear, it could be wolves, it could be any number of animals. It's not specifically just a wolf. So that's how a Skinwalker is described. And a Skinwalker itself is considered evil because they, delved into the death magic. They deal with corpses, things like that. So that's not something. Basically, Native American tribes used it as like a fear to keep, their children in line, and just stories. But what's interesting about the Skinwalker is sightings are still seen to this day, especially around the reservations, around the tribes. They claim to see Skinwalker encounters all the time. I'm going to read a couple of those. So this is from Reddit user Neptune420, and this is their story. My father owns a small delivery service that operates out of Farmington, New Mexico. We mostly deliver small packages out to the middle of nowhere that are too much of a hassle for the larger delivery companies to bother with. My dad is the only employee, and we have a few pickup trucks and a trailer. One day we get a delivery out to Window Rock, Arizona on the Navajo reservation, about 2 hours from Farmington. My dad gets a call for the job while he's chilling with his Navajo friend Travis and his girlfriend. Travis mentions how he has family in Window Rock that he hasn't seen in ages and suggests they go with him. I was about 6 or 7 at the time, and it was summertime, so Dad decided we'll all go together, and he can do his delivery real quick. Then while Travis sees his family, we can go check out Window Rock. Basically, Window Rock is a big rock face with a large hole in it that goes to the other side. It's pretty cool. We had to convoy in separate trucks since my dad's was loaded down with freight. We decided to bring along some walkie-talkies so we could communicate with one another. We spend our time in Window Rock. Everything is generally uneventful, and we start heading home along the highway with my dad and I in front, and Travis and his girlfriend in the truck behind us. I honestly don't remember most of Window Rock trip, but this next part I can never forget. We were somewhere on the highway between Window Rock and Gallup, New Mexico. It had just rained earlier in the day, and the road was kind of slick, so we were trying to keep it pretty slow. On the left of the highway there was nothing but sandstone cliffs, and on the right there's a huge field separated from the road by a small barbed wire fence. We crest the top of this hill, and down at the bottom of the hill we see what appears to be a very large dog sitting back on its haunches in the middle of the road facing the cliffs. My dad calls over the radio, "Hey Trav, do you see that big ass dog?" Travis starts yelling back over the radio, "That is not a dog. Speed up right now and hit it." He sounds almost hysterical. He just keeps screaming, "Hit it! Jai, you have to hit it. Please, please hit that effing thing right now." So my dad starts to speed up, and as we get closer, I begin to see it a little bit more clearly. It's covered in this brown, wiry, matted hair that appears to have dried blood all over it. It's still facing the cliffs, but the moment our headlights hit it, it turns and looks at us, and it has a face. I don't know how else to describe it other than a mix between bear's and a human's face. It looks twisted and distorted and almost in pain. As we get closer to this thing, we start to realize it's actually effing huge. Though it was still sitting on its haunches. It was about shoulder height with the hood of the truck. We get literally inches from hitting it when it lets out this scream that sounds like someone was screaming as their lungs were filling with water, and it leaps backwards towards the field, landing on the other side of the barbed wire fence. Then with another leap, it was gone from sight. Travis comes over the radio again, and he says, "Holy shit, keep driving. We have to get out of here. We have to go faster." He kept repeating that last part. "We have to get out of here. We have to go faster." Pretty soon we were speeding like crazy, and just as we start to come near the outskirts of Gallup, we get pulled over. Travis pulls his truck over with us. Naturally, this makes the cop, a Navajo man himself, very on edge, and he immediately asks why Travis felt the need to pull over as well. Travis says, "We just saw a Skinwalker a few miles back and it's been following us." The officer immediately turns white, slams something about a verbal warning, gets in his car and takes off. We all do the same. We didn't see anything else that night, but when we got home, Travis refused to let us leave without taking some kind of Navajo totem thing that was supposed to keep it away. I thought that was I thought that was an amazing story, especially for this person being so young, but vividly remembering everything. This next story is from a Reddit user by the name of Navajo Joe. I was a kid when this happened. My uncle and I were finishing up chopping, gathering firewood for my grandmother because it was getting dark. Driving back on a dirt road at about 30 miles per hour, give or take 5 miles, I had this awful sense of being watched. Before I could turn to look out my window, my passenger side, my uncle quickly shouted, "Don't!" I completely froze. My heart felt like it was beating out of my chest, then completely stopped when I heard a tap on my window. We were still driving. My uncle sped up and was loudly praying in my native language. I didn't know what was going on and thought it was over till our truck suddenly dipped from the bed. My uncle then started saying, "Look at me," and "Don't turn away," over and over. And then I heard it again, tap, tap, from the window behind me. It was getting harder for me to breathe and I wanted to cry. A minute or two passed and the truck dipped again. My uncle looked around and signed. It was quiet besides the truck and the road. He looked at me and said, "We will ask your father to do a prayer in the morning, so the evil will forget our faces." I remember curling up on the seat and just staring at the radio, watching the time, listening to my uncle sing an old prayer till we got to my grandmother's house. I called my uncle because I had a nightmare about that night. We talked about it for a bit. He said, "I didn't see faces, just eyes. Like brake lights you see on the road, it watched you." Before hanging up, I tried joking with him about it. "Why didn't you just step on the brake when it was in the back?" No laughter. Just a pause. Because it wasn't alone. This next witness testimony is from a Reddit user by the name of Nordic Alchemist. As many of you might already know, my Navajo people, including my own family, are very reluctant to speak about skinwalkers because it is believed to attract their attention. Well, I, however, grew up away from the Navajo Nation and was very naive about the subject when it came to skinwalkers. I was an absolute skeptic. My mom used to tell me a story of how back in the 80s when she lived with her siblings and my grandparents, who are still in Shiprock, but the southern outskirts, about how she and my aunt saw a skinwalker just outside their driveway under a streetlight. She described it as a black dog with dirty fur, a twisted noodle-like front leg, and these unnatural eyes with soft burnt orange glow. Me being my own closed-minded self doubted every word, but I never said my doubts out loud. These doubts totally changed last year when I went to my grandparents' house last October. Me and my family had just finished scourging the carnival. Scourging the carnival at the Navajo Nation Fair and called it a night. The house was close enough where we could walk home in just 10 minutes, so we did. When we got there, it was about 9 at night, where we stayed up until about 2, catching up with family and the local news. It was during that time I decided to open my mouth and blurt out the question, "Hey, are skinwalkers real?" "Guys," I asked. "You shouldn't be speaking about that," my grandmother said with almost a disturbed yell in her voice. So she and my grandfather both decided to go to bed. After being scolded by my mom, one of my aunts chimes in with a very cautious tone and says, "They're real all right. I had a few start screaming outside of my trailer in Farmington just a few nights ago. Your cousin had nightmares the whole night and woke up crying that morning. Not wanting to push the discomfort any further, we all decided to go to bed." Now, the trailer home is pretty old, and it was a really nice night, so we all slept with the windows open with the screens to prevent bugs coming in. Everyone had drifted off to sleep except me, because my mind was still going a million miles a minute about skinwalkers, and wondered if I would ever encounter one while here on the reservation. As a kid, I was told it's also taboo to think about skinwalkers because it can still call their attention. That's when the shit totally hit the fan. Just as I was setting and finally getting relaxed for sleep, I started hearing something moving outside. I get up from the couch and start wandering over to the kitchen window. In the trailer, all of the rooms have lights out, so the only visible light that can be seen is from the porch light out front. I was thankful for this because I told myself if it really was a skinwalker outside, then hopefully it wouldn't notice me seeing it. So I muster up the courage and take a quick scan of the outside. From the porch light, all I can see is the dusty ground and the vehicles that my family drove, along with some old metal trash cans that stood beside the road. Looking for about a good 5 seconds, I wasn't able to see anything, so I was getting ready to turn around and walk back to bed thinking it was just a stray cat or something. I only took 2 steps when I hear what sounded like a distorted scream coming from outside. It was definitely close by. Fear rising, I look outside again, and then I see it. It was a coyote-like figure staring at my direction from behind the cars, just outside of the reach of the porch light. Only it looked wrong and gave off an evil vibe just from seeing it. It was gray with very disheveled hair, and a horrific orange-green soft glow came from its eyes. I ran back to the bedroom, and it was at this moment I began to also notice an awful stench in the air that smelled like rotting meat. I started trying to wake up my mom, who was like, "Oh my God, it's almost 3 a.m. What do you want?" I immediately began in a shaken voice, "There's something scary outside," she said, now annoyed because I woke her up. "It's probably just a stray animal or something. It's the res. Animals wander all the time, all night." She obviously wasn't getting the drift of what I was saying, so I screamed, "There's some Blair Witch Project shit going on outside, Ma." That got her attention. What the hell are you talking about?" she said. Then we heard it. The thing outside started making more of its dreadful like screams and started what sounded like thrashing outside on the ground. "Hear that? That's what I'm talking about." So both her and I got back up and looked outside the window, and the coyote thing was making its way to the door. It walked with an odd limp and dragged its back right leg as if it was handicapped. We could hear it start to scratch against the door and make this odd muffled moaning sound. My mom went and got my dad, and they both started shouting in Navajo all sorts of words, telling the thing to go away, saying it's not welcome here. Well, all this commotion was enough to get the rest of the trailer up as they came out into the hallway. The only thing my mom did was turn to them and say, "Skinwalker," while proceeding to point to the door, noises still happening. Apparently, they knew exactly what to do as my grandfather got out a handgun from a drawer and a bag of ashes. He coated a few bullets and loaded them into the gun and went straight to the door, yelling out more Navajo that was too fast for me to comprehend. He swung open the door and fired twice. Nothing. The thing managed to escape before my grandpa could put a bullet in it. "That's the fastest one I've ever seen," said my grandpa. Next thing you know, my aunts and my parents are freaking out about what just happened, saying stuff like, "What if it comes back tomorrow and it saw us? Does that mean we're targets now?" Afterwards, my grandparents calmed everybody down, myself included, saying we'll be fine, and we all went to bed around 3-ish. Morning comes, and my grandparents call one of their neighbors to explain to them what happened. Apparently, one of them was a medicine man who used to partake in Yibi Cheese Navajo ceremonies used for healing and curing sickness. He came over to bless each family member and the grounds outside. So there you have it. Stories of Navajo encounters. What do you think? Do you think that's what it is, that it's just all folklore? It's something that it's, I don't know, some sort of creature, or that they're mixing with truth and legend? Mind you, there legends and myths go back hundreds, if not thousands of years. And a lot of Navajo, especially Navajo legends, are all verbal stories. So these stories have been passed down. These experiences are kept and passed down again. I just find it all fascinating that people encounter things out on the reservations, out in those areas, and those areas specifically, especially around the Navajo reservation. There's one ranch that we all have heard of. If you haven't heard of, you'll just have to turn on a documentary and you'll know all about it, but it's Skinwalker Ranch. And it makes you wonder, is it really because there's something out there? There's a portal, there's vortexes, there's, high radiation? Is it mutated animals? We just don't know, but there's definitely something out there. And there's stories after stories, and there's stories from people who are non-native. A lot of truck drivers have encounters going down the highway when they have to go through Navajo Nation or, just up north, the Four Corners area. There's always truck drivers talking about they see dogs, massive dogs. They're easily 2-3 times the size of a wolf, keeping pace with their cabs and always with the red eyes. I find it, like I said, fascinating. There's so much unknown just in our world alone. But that's all I have for you guys tonight. Tell me what you think. I hope you like these stories. Definitely more to come. And if you have any suggestions or you have your own experiences or your own stories that you would like to share, please send them to me. You can reach me at theparanormalchick@gmail.com, as well as theparanormalchick@icloud.com. And I want your feedback. I want to know what you think. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Let me have it. Until tomorrow, my friends, stay safe and good night.